All right, we're on Parshas Va'era. It's on page 318, which is the same as 318. We're getting now into the meat of the whole discussion, the whole section of the Torah, dealing with the coming out of Egypt and what Hashem does to Pharaoh and why. The first thing I think I want to explain, without going into this, is really an important question that's going to come to mind sometime, and if it doesn't, you really should, which is, we have the idea that a person has free will. That is, you have the ability to make a moral choice for anything that you do. So if you're if you're in the car and you're hungry and you see a kosher restaurant and you see McDonald's, you have a choice. Which one do I go to? Right? You have a moral choice. If you're walking down the street and you see somebody drop a $50 bill, you can say nothing and take the 50, or you can tell them. Right? Either it's a moral choice. You can make that choice. Because you have a moral choice, if you choose the right thing, which is not usually the easiest thing, but the right thing, you will ultimately receive a reward for doing what's right. That's what the Torah tells us. If you do the wrong thing, you will not. Right? But that's because you could choose. If I would make it that you couldn't choose, that every time you saw money, you would return it to its owner. Right? You wouldn't even think that you might take it. It was not even a possibility. So then there's no choice. There's no you're not being tempted to do something wrong. So the only way that you can choose to do something right is if you're tempted to not do it. Right? That's how it works. If every time I show you food, you are compelled to eat it, so then I can't hold you responsible for keeping kosher, because there's nothing you can do. Every time you see food, you eat it, like a dog. A dog sees food, he wants to eat it. It doesn't make a difference to a dog what it is. So of course the dog's not going to have a rule about what he eats, because he doesn't think about it. So we also have this. That's called free will. It's the ability to choose on moral issues. Right? Now, Pharaoh also, right, we know Pharaoh was punished for what he did with the Jews. Hashem says, let the Jews out. Pharaoh says, I don't know who this God is. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm God. I'm going to do what I want. So God says, okay, I'm going to punish him. He doesn't do it. So he punishes him once and then twice and three times. Finally, he says, he punishes him, and then he says, I'm going to harden his heart. I'm going to make it. Pharaoh sees, all of the animals are dying. All right, he says, all right, let the Jews go. It's not worth it. And then God comes and hardens his heart and makes him say, no, I'm not going to let the Jews go. I'm going to keep them. Which means he took away his free will. He can't choose to let them go. Moshe comes and says, God says let the Jewish people go. And God makes it so Pharaoh can't say okay. He has to say no. Right? So he took away Pharaoh's free will. Right? That's what he does. So how can they punish him? How can you punish Pharaoh for doing these things to the Jews when God made it that he had to do it? Not only that, but it's even more so. We know in advance that God told Abraham, your children will be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And Abraham's children, right, it was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's children were slaves in Egypt. And then Pharaoh comes and he's keeping them, and God says, I want them to come out. Pharaoh says no. And then God makes it that Pharaoh continues to say no. So not only was Pharaoh doing what God wanted, which was that the Jewish people should be slaves, but then when God wants them, it's time to leave, he makes it that Pharaoh has to argue with him. He doesn't have the choice. He hardens his heart, and then he punishes him. So how can that be? You understand? See the question? It's not nice. It's not right. How can God punish him when he didn't have a choice? The first thing, he does what God wants. And secondly is he can't choose to stop. He has to keep doing it. God makes him keep doing it. So why? Why would we say that God punishes him? So all the commentaries ask this question, because it's a very fundamental question to understand what does the Torah want from us. Because if you don't have the ability to choose right from wrong, you're not responsible. There's nothing you can do about it. Right? So you can't be punished or you can't be rewarded. Right? If everything in the world is kosher, and God tells you to keep kosher, there's not much reward to keep kosher, because everything's kosher, right? If God says you have to keep kosher and nothing's kosher, you're not going to get punished for eating on kosher, because there's nothing you can do. It's the same idea here. So the commentaries say that a number of answers, but one of them is that Pharaoh was supposed to be the master over the Jewish people. The Jews were supposed to become slaves to Egypt. Egypt was the most powerful country in the world. It was, at that point, was the opposite of what the Jewish people should be. It was a country where it was totally hedonistic. It was corrupt. People did all types of horrible things, and this was the society that they had. And the Jews were forced into this society in order to, as God said, we had to have certain things put into our spiritual DNA. And then what happened, and now it's time for us to leave. And Pharaoh doesn't let us go. So they says that the reason that Pharaoh was punished, according to one of the commentaries, is that God wanted him to make the Jewish people slaves. But he went way beyond that. It was much worse than just being slaves. He humiliated them. He made the men do women's work and the women do men's work. He killed children in front of their parents. He showed that human beings have no worth. He tried to destroy everything that the Jewish people had. And that's not what God wanted. God wanted, to this point, make them slaves. But more than that is too much. And therefore, because he chose to go beyond what he was supposed to do, he's punished for that. And then when it comes time for him to let the people go and God stops him, so here answers the question another way, which is, first thing, Pharaoh was punished because he went beyond what he was supposed to do. Then when God takes away his free will, he's still punished. One idea is that God wanted that once and for all, the world should know who I am. The world needs to know that there is a God, that God says that people have responsibilities, people have to act in a certain way, and that there is a group of people who are going to help lead the world morally, and that's the Jewish people. God says, I'm going to do this once, and that's it. We hear all the time, if God would just lift up this book for a second, I would believe in him. And he doesn't lift up the book. If God would just make this phone go up in the air, I'll believe in him. We all say this kind of stuff. So, right, he's not going to do it. You know why? Because he already did it. He did it in Egypt. He went and he killed the firstborn. He went and he turned the water to blood. He did all of these things in Egypt so that throughout history, people will know that he is God. And that's it. So therefore, it was a necessity for him to do that. And because Pharaoh was already liable for what he did, he continued it because he wants the world to know once and for all, I am God. And that you have responsibilities to me, and I'm here for you to have a good life, but you have to do what you need to do. And that's what God says. And therefore, in the case of Pharaoh, we understand that he took away his free will. But taking away his free will in such a case is not so odd. You know, we're thinking it's the only time. But really what happens is like this. When the Rambam explains this to us, but we understand from our own human nature, that when somebody does something a number of times, it becomes a part of who you are. For instance, if you want to use something, you get addicted to it. Let's say coffee, right? Nobody wakes up in the beginning when they're a child and says, I need a coffee or I can't wake up. There's no such thing. The only reason that we need coffee to wake up is because we drink coffee. If we didn't drink coffee, we wouldn't need it to wake up. Because what happens is that we're normal. We drink coffee, our body gets used to it. When we wake up in the morning, we're going through withdrawal because we don't have the coffee. So we drink the coffee, it makes us feel awake. But if we never drank coffee, we wouldn't need the coffee to feel awake. That's how it works. We got addicted to it. So when it comes to something like coffee, you know, there's no real negative to it. It doesn't really hurt anything. It's an addiction that's not really a problem. But there are many addictions that are problems. You have everything from drug addictions to gambling addictions to intimacy addictions, all kinds of things. And what happens is that a person starts to believe, I have to do this. And it becomes a part of who they are. And sometimes they have to do it to the point where they can't stop. Like if you're dealing with drugs, what often happens with drugs is that you take it once, twice, 3 times, you like it. Right? You feel good. It makes you feel good. So you say, I'm going to take it again. Now what happens is your body gets so used to it that the effect that you're getting from it is less now because you keep taking it. And your body starts to get used to it. It starts to need it. So now if you don't take the drug after 5, 6 times, your body feels like it's going through withdrawal, and you need to take the drug just to be normal, just like with coffee. Then what happens is that because you want to feel something from the drug, you have to keep taking more. So instead of taking 1 pill, you have to take 2, and that 2, you have to take 3. Well, you get to a point that in order to get that you're addicted, so you have to take it, And you get to the point where you, in order to get the feeling you want, you have to take so much of the drug that it'll kill you. Right? But you can't stop because your body needs it. And if you stop it, that also could kill you. So you're stuck, but you put yourself in this situation by getting addicted. And that's to some extent what Pharaoh did. Pharaoh decided that he wanted to live off having slaves. You got people you don't have to pay, right? You imagine having a business, 10 people working for you, you don't have to pay them. You're going to make money, right? He has a whole nation of people who work for him, doesn't have to pay him. So that's one. Second thing is that he made it his own hobby to hurt people. He killed babies, and he killed women, and he killed children, and he humiliated people. He did all kinds of things to the Jewish people beyond what he was supposed to do. Right? He did it to the point where the cruelty that he was doing became a part of who he was. He became addicted to it. He had to continue doing this. He couldn't stop himself. Now, the fact that he couldn't stop himself, that means he lost his free will. Right? God took away his freedom of choice because he's now addicted to it. But the fact is, how did he get there? In the first place was because he chose to do this. Like, no one becomes a heroin addict unless they choose to take heroin once. If you never take it, you're never going to be an addict. And the first time you take it, you're not an addict. You're doing it because you want to. And you say, well, I'm not going to become an addict. I can stop any time. Every addict says that, and everybody becomes an addict. But that's the idea. Pharaoh, I can do whatever I need to the Jews. It's fun. They amuse me, and he could torture them. After a while, it became a part of who he was, and he couldn't stop anymore. So he lost his free will, but he's still responsible because he caused it to happen. So that's just a basic understanding of the idea of how it is that God could punish Pharaoh for doing what God wants him to do in the first place. Right? That's part one. And now, when we get into the story at hand, so here we have Hashem telling Moshe, you have to go, and you have to tell the Jewish people now that it's time for them to come. He's not even telling Pharaoh yet. First tell the Jewish people. And he comes back and he says, they don't listen to me. Why? Because he goes now to tell Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, what do you mean? I should let the Jewish people go. Who says? Well, their God says. Well, who's their God? It says that he opened a book of all the gods in the world. He didn't find the name of the Jewish God. So he said, there's no such God. That's what the Medrash says. It's not literal. It means that he never heard of this. He wasn't going to listen. So he says, I'm going to show them. Why is it that the Jews want to go free? Because they got too much time on their hands. Right? If they were busy, they wouldn't be thinking about going free. So I'm going to make them busy. I want to tell them they got to make as many bricks as they did, but no straw. Now they got to make bricks. It's harder. They keep them busy so they won't think about leaving. So he does that, and it says because of the hard work and the strain and anxiety the Jewish people were under, when Moshe says, I'm going to save you, I'm going to free you, God sent me to free you, they said, you're crazy. You're nuts. I'm not going to listen to you. So he tells God, the Jewish people don't listen to me. Pharaoh's not going to listen to me either. Right, that makes sense, right? If the Jewish people who want to get out of Egypt, who don't want to be slaves, they won't listen to me, that I could take them out of Egypt, then Pharaoh, who doesn't want them to go, is certainly not going to listen to me, right? Except that where it doesn't work is the Jewish people who want to go out of Egypt, why don't they listen to him? Because Pharaoh gave them so much work that they can't listen to anybody. They can't listen to anything. So God tells him, go out there and do it. And finally, so Moshe goes and he does it. And here we begin with the plagues. And we go through this whole long understanding of the plagues. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, Pharaoh knew that through his pagan worships that he did, that there's going to be a savior for the Jewish people, and they're going to take them out of Egypt. He knew that. But he wasn't sure who it was. So at first, right, that's why he wanted to kill all the boys, because he knew it would be a boy, a man who's going to take them out. But then eventually, he's not sure who it's going to be. But he finds out that it's going to be a Hebrew, and they're going to be from the tribe of Levi. That's who it's going to be. And so he decides, here's what he's going to do. He's going to make the tribe of Levi that they're not slaves. They don't have to be slaves. And this is true. The tribe of Levi were not slaves with the rest of the Jews. And because they're not slaves, they're not going to feel the pain, right? Because they're not slaves. So whoever the leader is going to be, he's not going to be able to save them because he doesn't understand them. They're slaves. He's not a slave. He's not going to be able to relate to the people, so it won't work. So Pharaoh said, that's what I'll do. I'll make the tribe of Levi not be slaves. Everyone else will be a slave. And therefore the tribe of Levi won't be able to save the Jewish people because they won't understand them. They're so different. What he didn't realize is that Moshe, who was such an extraordinary leader, felt the pain of all of the Jewish people, even though he wasn't one. And we saw that last week, where it says that he grew up and he went out among his people. He walks among the Jewish people. He feels the pain that they're in, even though he himself is raised in the palace. And therefore, Pharaoh misunderstood how great Moshe really was, because he was able to still feel that pain. Now, this is a very fundamental idea I spoke about last week on Shabbos, which is the fundamental concept of no seba ol chavero, which means feeling the pain of another person, and that this is a fundamental aspect of a Jew, of what a Jew is. A Jew feels the pain of other Jews. We all do it. You open a newspaper and you see a Jew gets in trouble, you're embarrassed for that person because that person did something wrong. You're embarrassed because you're both Jewish. If a Jew's in pain, right, if somebody wants to raise money, they tell you about a Jew being in pain. People give money. People give their heart. People feel, because that's how we are, right? It doesn't work that way with all the nations of the world. They're not the same. Not that they don't care, but they don't have that same feeling. You're not going to say somebody who was born in Scotland four generations ago, their great-grandfather was born in Scotland, and they've been living in Canada all these years, and someone comes to them and they say, you know, there's a famine in Scotland. You know, we need to raise money. So the person's not going to necessarily feel such a tie to the people from Scotland. They've been in here all these years in Canada. Maybe they'll help, but they're not going to necessarily give a lot of money because they don't feel Scottish. They don't feel a tie. But Jews do. Right? You can have a Jew in India, and I've never been to India, and the Jews in India certainly don't look like us. They're different. But they're Jews, and if they need help, we're there. We help. Right? That's called no seba ol chavero, feeling the pain of your fellow, of another person. That's what Moshe felt, even though he wasn't enslaved, and Pharaoh wasn't prepared for that. We see it last week, many times, about how Moshe was in the water. Right? He was a baby in the Nile, and his sister goes down there to watch where he's going. Why? Because she wants to be there with him. She feels his pain. And it says his brother Aaron was down there, that they all felt the pain. So this is a integral part of the DNA within every Jew, that we feel the pain of each other. And we see that here as well. So now you have Moshe and Aaron going to tell Pharaoh to let the people go. And we begin with all of the stories of the plagues. So first thing he has to do is he has to prove himself. So in 325, you have Moshe and Aaron going in front of Pharaoh, and he says, all right, you want to know who, you don't know who this God is? You want to know that we're for real? So he tells Aaron, take your staff and throw it down on the ground, and it becomes a snake. Right? So you say, that's a pretty good trick. Right? It's not even a trick, it's real. The stick became a snake. It didn't look like a snake, it became a snake. Right? It was miraculous because it was a special stick that God gave them. Right? So Pharaoh says, big deal. My pagan magicians can do that. They take a stick and it turns into a snake. But then it says that Aaron's snake ate theirs. So it ate their snakes. Right? Which their snakes couldn't do that, because they were making what they were doing is they were doing a trick. And in Aaron's case, God really changed it. It was a different thing. So snakes eat, but an imaginary snake doesn't. So they weren't able to do the same. And you have example after example of whatever he does, Moshe does, you have the Pharaoh's people doing it. And Pharaoh says then, I don't have to listen to you. Who are you? So now he begins with the plagues. And that begins in 327. You have the first one with the blood. So he tells Aaron, take your staff and stretch it out over the waters of Egypt, and all the waters, the canals, everything will turn to blood. So the first question is, why is it that Aaron is the one who's told to do this? Moshe is the head guy. Moshe is the savior. Why doesn't he just take the stick and wave it over the water and it turns to blood? So this tells you an interesting thing. And that point is that the Torah is telling us that Moshe was saved in the water. Right? Moshe was in the Nile. He was a baby. Right? The Nile, and in the Nile he floated. So even though the Nile had no choice, the Nile didn't choose to make Moshe float, right? You put a straw in the Nile, it floats, right? Put it in your sink, it'll float. Right? That's what it does. Nevertheless, Moshe felt gratitude to the water. Right? That there was a feeling of gratitude to the water, even though it's an inanimate object, and it was doing what it's supposed to do. Water does that, right? Things float in the water. Nevertheless, he felt that gratitude, and therefore he felt it was inappropriate for that Moshe should be the one who causes the water to turn to blood, to use it as a curse, because the water was a blessing to him. It saved his life. Now, we know, of course, that water has no feeling. And we know also that water doesn't do what it chooses to do. It does whatever it does. It has no mind. So what this message is telling you is two things. One thing is that when it comes to an inanimate object, if we have gratitude to something that has no mind, then certainly we should have gratitude to human beings. Right? When somebody does something for you, you should show gratitude to them. Even right? Because if we show gratitude to a body of water, then we should show gratitude to a person. Right? They tell us the same idea when it comes to embarrassment. There's a famous story of the Chafetz Chaim that one time he was invited to somebody's house for Shabbos, and you can imagine if you had the Chafetz Chaim at your house, like you would want everything to be perfect. I mean, he's the greatest rabbi of his time. He was a sainted person, an extraordinary person. And if I can imagine if I go to shul and there's the Chafetz Chaim in shul and say, "You want to come over for dinner?" and he says, "Yes." So I go home and I tell my wife, "The Chafetz Chaim's coming for dinner." Right? So you think my wife will put out the nicest china and do everything so that, to make him feel like an honored guest, because he is. So the story is told that a man brings home the Chafetz Chaim on Friday night for dinner, and to make kiddush, and the wine is out, and the kiddush cup is out, and the plates are out, and the challah is out, but the challah is not covered. And you're supposed to cover the challah so you can make kiddush, right? It's not covered. So the man calls his wife. He says, "Come in here. What are you doing? We have the Chafetz Chaim is here, the greatest rabbi of the day, right? He's here, and you leave the challah uncovered. How can you do such a thing? It's a horrible thing that you leave it uncovered like that. Go get the cover right now and bring it in here." Right? He yells at her to do this so that they can make kiddush. And they make kiddush, and they're about to go wash their hands. And the Chafetz Chaim looks at the man, and he said, you asked your wife to cover the challah. Do you know why we cover the challah? Why we do it? Anyone know why? You know what they say? So the Medrash explains, you cover the challah because you don't want to embarrass the challah. Because really, according to the laws of blessings, you should make the blessing over the challah before you make blessing over wine. But in order for us to eat on Shabbos, you have to make a blessing on wine first. So therefore, so that you don't do it wrong, you cover the challah as if it's not there. So the way we say it is, you don't want to embarrass the challah because the challah has the first right. Right, it's the first one. You just make a bracha on it first. Since you're not going to do it, you'll embarrass it. So you cover it up so it shouldn't get embarrassed. So Chafetz Chaim asks him, "Do you know why?" So the guy says, "Yeah." So we shouldn't embarrass the challah. So he says to him, "Do you think that the rabbis were so conscious about the feelings of challah, but wasn't conscious about your wife's feelings? That you can't embarrass the challah, but you can embarrass your wife?" Right. So the man, of course, understood very clearly what he was saying. If we can feel that an inanimate object, which we know has no feelings, bread has no feelings, not even challah, and we say that we cover it so it shouldn't be embarrassed, then we should understand the same thing with people. We shouldn't do things to embarrass people, even more so. In the case of this, that he has gratitude to the water, which didn't choose to save his life, but it saved his life, we should have gratitude to people. But even more than that, in the case of the water did what water does, right? Things float. It's not doing anything special. If you said to me, "Oh well, the water split," right, like in the splitting of the Red Sea, and because of that, Moshe was able to his cradle sat on the bottom of the water, and it didn't get wet because it split. So there, the water is doing something that it doesn't usually do. So I said, now you have reason to thank it, because even if it has no feelings and it has no mind, it did something different to save him. But if it just does what it really does all the time, why are you thanking it? It's just like if you go and your mailman comes, he delivers the mail. Do you thank the mailman for delivering the mail? Well, it's his job to deliver the mail, and he does it every day, and that's what he's supposed to do. So he's not doing you a favor. All right, if you say to him, "Look, I'm not going to be home today. I really need the mail. Can you bring it to my office?" Then he does you a favor. You could say thank you. So what this is telling us, that even when someone does something for you, but even if they didn't go out of their way, even if they're paid, you should still show appreciation. That's what it's telling us. So normally we would say, why should I show appreciation? Because this is how you judge it. What you judge is, what effect did I have? What happened? What did I get out of this? I got my mail. Did he get paid for it? Yeah. Does he really care that I get my mail? Probably not. But I got my mail, so it doesn't really matter. And I should say thank you because I got my mail. If I get a package, I got my package. Did he go out of his way for me? Not at all. It doesn't mean anything. What we don't think about when we have gratitude, we don't think about the intention of the person. We think about the effect on us. And it was a good effect for us, right? So I want to thank him for it. So that's what this section is telling us. Right? Moshe could not be the one to use the water as a curse because the water saved his life, even though the water has no feelings, and even though the water would do this for anybody. Nevertheless, he couldn't do it, so he had to have Aaron do it. And Aaron goes and he turns it into blood. Now we understand, of course, that for the Egyptians, right, they couldn't drink water, it says, from the river because it turned into blood. What they had to do was they had to go to the Jews and they had to buy water, because for the Jews it didn't turn to blood. Right? That was part of the miracle. So if a Jew would have water, if the Egyptian wanted water, he'd have to pay the Jew for the water. Now, of course, this is a message, because the Jews are slaves and the Egyptians are the boss. And now the boss is coming to the Jews. It's not even their land. They're visitors, right? And the Nile is my land. I'm an Egyptian. It's my land. And I have to buy water from you? Right? It's demeaning. Right? God is showing the Egyptians, you think that you're on top and the Jews are slaves and you're superior? You're going to have to buy water, the basic substance of life. You're going to have to buy it from the Jews. And that's what they had to do. So that's what we have there. And of course, Pharaoh doesn't change. Then we have the famous story of the frogs. And the story of the frogs has got to be, in my opinion, one of the most odd stories, for a number of reasons. What happens next is that the next plague comes, and it says here, go to Pharaoh. Tell them, this is on 329 verse 26, tell them, so said Hashem, send out my people that they can serve me, but if you refuse to send out, behold, I shall strike your entire boundary with frogs. The river will swarm with frogs, and they shall ascend and come into your palace, and your bedroom, and your bed, and in the house of your servants and of your people, and into your ovens and your kneading bowls, and into you and your people and all your servants will frogs go. Right? So God says, this is what you're going to tell Pharaoh. So they go and they tell Pharaoh, and according to how the Medrash says it happened, is that this one frog, like the mother of all frogs, came out of the Nile, and Egyptians saw it and went and hit it, and when it hit it, it became two frogs. And then they hit each of those frogs, and they became two frogs. And they kept multiplying this way. The Egyptians kept hitting them, and they kept multiplying. And you got more and more frogs. And the next thing you know, you got frogs everywhere, because they keep hitting them. They're hitting them in there. You got a frog in your house, you hit them, and now it's two frogs in your house. You hit that, it's four frogs. You open up your oven, there's a frog inside, you hit it, two frogs are in your oven now. A frog in your bed, you hit it, now there's two frogs in your bed. Right? It keeps multiplying like this. Right? So the first question they have to ask is, dummy, stop hitting the frogs. Like, what are you doing? Why are you the first guy doesn't know better, because what was happening before today? You hit a frog, he's dead. So it's done. So you get rid of him. If you had a frog and you go into your house and you find a frog sitting like under your sheets, right? You're going to get rid of the frog, right? It's normal. But when the plague came, you tried to hit the frog and get rid of it, right? Now you got two frogs. So if that happens once or twice, okay, right, it can happen. But if it keeps happening over and over, so shouldn't you stop? Stop hitting them, and maybe they'll go away. Or you know what? You can live with 5 frogs in your house. You start hitting them, you're gonna have 10 frogs, and you're gonna have 100 frogs. So what are you gonna? You got to do something about it. You can't just keep hitting them. So the point is that this is the idea of what anger does to people. Frustration and anger, that people will do things that will actually hurt them because they're so upset, because they're so angry. And this is why the Rambam tells us that every human character trait, everything that we have, that we're generous or we're not generous, and we're lazy or we're not lazy, they all have good sides and bad sides. Right? To be generous is good. To give away all your money is not good. To be economical is good. To be stingy is not good. They're the same trait. just applied right and right, applied wrong. But there's one trait that has no good purpose, and that's the trait of anger. Anger has no positive purpose. Well, a person should not get angry. I don't mean that you should get angry and keep it in. You have to work to not get angry. Keeping it in will kill you. But you should work to not get angry, because there's no positive purpose for anger. Because what happens when you get angry? Right? It says one of the best ways, one of my rabbis told me, to make sure you don't get angry, next time you get angry, go look at yourself in the mirror. You look crazy, you look stupid, right? Your face is all red and everything, right? When a person is angry, they lose control, and they will keep hitting the frogs, even though there's more frogs, right? They'll keep yelling at their spouse, even though the problem is that they're yelling at their spouse. They'll keep, insulting their children, even though the problem is that they insult their children. They keep doing it and doing it and doing it because they're angry. They lose control, and the anger, right, has no positive purpose. Right? That's exactly what happened with these frogs, and we see it's with the same thing with us in our own lives, how we do things. There's also a story with the Chafetz Chaim as well. Could be true. It might be a true story. I don't know, but the idea is true. Whereas these two men were fighting with each other, and we have a tradition coming from the Torah that if you fight with people, like a bitter, ugly fight, that fight will carry over and it'll affect your children. Not necessarily does it mean that your children will fight. That's probably a given. That if you fight with another person, another family, your children will fight with that family too. That's probably a given. But it means that it'll affect your children. It says, this is one of the reasons it says in the Gemara that children die, is because the parents fight with people. So that Hashem, it's a curse that Hashem gives us. So it says the one time that these two people had a bitter fight. These two guys in a shul had a terrible fight between them, and they couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't be in the same room together. And Chafetz Chaim says to them, "It's going to kill. You can't do this. It's going to kill your children. Your children are going to die because of this. You've got to stop." And the guy says, "I don't care. I'm right, and he's wrong, and he has to know it." And this guy, it says that this guy's children died because he wouldn't stop. He has kept doing it. I'm right, right? And the point is like this: anger causes us to lose control, to no longer be logical, and we believe that if we get angry enough and we do enough nasty things to somebody, that they're going to finally understand that. They're going to understand that I was right. And the fact is, it never works. It never happens. If you have a disagreement with somebody, you never do something to teach them a lesson, because they'll never get the lesson. That will never, ever happen. You could never teach somebody a lesson by acting angry, because they're not going to learn it. All they're going to see is you're angry. Right? That doesn't work. But what happens is that we become illogical when we get angry, and we think it will work, and we'll do it, and we do it all the time. Right? We do it when we drive. That guy cut me off. I'm going to show him, and you race in front of him by driving incorrectly, or something happens in your home, or something happens in a store, or something happens in the mall, and somebody takes your parking spot, or somebody does this or that. I'm going to teach them. You never teach them. The only thing that happens is you get hurt. Yes?
Oh, wait, it happens in families, like you say, right? You say don't get angry, so you just assume that nothing will change and just leave them like.
No, there are things that can change, but anger won't be the vehicle to do it. If you want to try to help your children,
nothing, to some people, nothing you can't change them, to care more or. Right?
Okay, there are some people like that, but there are some that you can, but you can't do it by being angry. What you can do is you can have a talk with them. You can speak to them when neither of you are angry. But if one of you are angry, it won't work. And people just won't accomplish anything. So that's what it's saying here. That's why it says with the frogs that there was only one frog, but they kept hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And then they came more and more and more frogs. So you'd say, "Stop it already. Stop hitting what are you, dummy? Don't hit the frogs." They couldn't. They couldn't stop themselves. They were so angry. So that's the same idea with us. That we have to realize that our anger is so difficult that it causes us to do things that are harmful for us. That's the idea. And then finally, so of course they get rid of the frogs. Now next we have an interesting thing. We have with the lice, the dever. So it says, beginning on 331. It says, Hashem says to Moshe, say to Aaron, put out your staff, strike the dust of the land, and it will become lice. So they did. Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff, and he struck the dust of the land, and the lice infested was on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout Egypt. The sorcerers did the same, right? But they couldn't do it, right? So it says that, right, it went on on all of these different animals and so forth. So now, there's an interesting thing. Here's what happened. God tells Moshe, go and warn Pharaoh. Either let the Jewish people go, or I'm going to kill off your animals. Your animals are going to die, right? Through this illness. So he sends them out to go do that, and so what happens is the Egyptians, who are smart, they say, wait a minute, we got nothing to lose. Let's take our animals, and instead of leaving them out where they can get hurt, we'll bring them inside, and then they won't get hurt. So who are the ones who brought the animals inside? The people the Egyptians, who were afraid that God might kill the animals. God's got 1,000%, right? He's always right. He says, I'm going to turn the water into blood. It did. Frogs are going to come. It did. So all of these things are happening. So now he says, if people figure it out, if I bring my animals indoors, then they'll stay alive, right? So then, okay, that's fine. So this plague comes, and anybody who left their animals in the field, they died. Anyone who brought them indoors, they lived. Only the Egyptians who brought their animals indoors lived, and those Egyptians had to believe in the Jewish God, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So now we have a next plague, and watch what happens here. So he tells them now, go out to where Pharaoh is by the water, and you should tell him that tomorrow I'm going to send wild beasts, right? And if you want your animals to live, bring them inside, right? Bring your animals inside. If you don't, the animals will be eaten by these wild, like you imagine, lions and tigers start walking through the street. They're going to eat the cows. So he says, if you want your cows to live, bring them indoors. So here's the problem. If in the first case, the animals are going to be killed, right, if you left them outdoors. So people figured that out, and they said, okay, we believe in this Jewish God. We're going to bring our animals indoors because we don't want to lose the animals. So they did. So now who has animals, right? Only the people who believed in God. Everybody else's animals died, right? They're the only ones who have animals are the ones who believed in God. So now God comes and says, okay, if you want I'm going to bring wild animals for the next plague. You want your animals to live? Bring them indoors. You don't want them to live? You stay outside. Right? So the wild animals came and killed off a bunch of animals. So which idiot left his animals outside? Well, the only people who had animals were already ones who showed before that they're going to listen to God and put the animals away. So who left them outside? Right? They already know, if I leave my animals outside, they're going to die. But we tried that before. Everyone left them out, they died. The only people with animals now are ones who listened. Now God comes and says, bring your animals inside, because anything left outside is going to die. Well, people say, well, it worked last time, I'm bringing them in again. But it says the animals died. So who left their animals outside? Hear the question? Right? The first time they listened, the second time they didn't. How can you not listen? You bring them inside, they live. You leave them outside, they die. So now he comes and says the same thing again. The only people who have animals are the ones who brought them inside the first time. He tells them to do it again, and they didn't do it. Why don't they do it? Why did people leave the animals outside the second time? And the difference in the two cases is, in the first time, the people figured out themselves that if I bring my animals in, they're not going to get killed. God doesn't say that. He just says, I'm going to bring a plague, right, and it'll kill the animals. The second time with the wild beasts, right, he says, if you want animals to live, bring them inside. So this is what happens to the Egyptians. The Egyptians say, look, we're smart people. We know that if we brought them inside, they were going to live. So we did. But now their God is telling us, this guy Moshe is coming telling me, I'm the Egyptian, he's telling me that I got to bring my animals inside? Forget it, I'm not listening to him. He's telling me what to do. Right? Now it's the arrogance. The Egyptians were arrogant. Who are these Jews? It's like, you have a cleaning lady comes and tells you how to invest your money. What do you mean? This is a cleaning lady. Why is she telling me to invest my money? Well, if you're so arrogant that you think that a cleaning lady might not know, I mean, I'm not telling you to be silly and let anybody tell you to invest your money. But don't think that just because somebody is a foreigner, or they're a refugee, or they're different, that they don't have something good to say, or that they should be looked down upon. And the Egyptians said, oh, these Jews, they're slaves. We're going to listen to them. They say, bring the animal inside. I'm not going to do what they want. And they left them outside just to show us. So God said, okay, go ahead, show me. And he did, and they killed them all. Right? Because the first time, I'm a wise person, and I took them in. The second time, you're not going to tell me what to do. Right? And that's what happened. And that's because of their arrogance. And that's also another way that we destroy ourselves, is our arrogance, where we think that we're greater. In fact, you just have it here with Pharaoh. If God says to Moshe, go down to the Nile. If you want to see Pharaoh, go down to the Nile. What's Pharaoh doing at the Nile? He's the king. The king's in his palace. Why did he tell him to go to the Nile? So it says that Pharaoh, he was a dictator, right? The dictator doesn't like how you did your hair today, he cuts off your head. And no one can do anything to him. He's the dictator. He's the king. He can do whatever he wants. You have a nice stereo. He wants it. He just takes it. There's nothing you can do. He's the king, right? So the king lives in his castle. He can do whatever he wants. Now Pharaoh told people, I'm not just the king. I'm God. He told people he was God. And gods don't go to the bathroom. God is God. He doesn't need to go to the bathroom. But Pharaoh is a human. He has to go to the bathroom. So he goes and he has to find a way to do that. So it used to be every day he would go down to the Nile and he'd bathe. But while he's bathing, he'd go to the bathroom because nobody could see, right? So God knows that. So God says, Moshe, go down to the Nile in the morning. You'll find Pharaoh there. He's going there because he's pretending he's a god and he doesn't have to use the bathroom, but he does, right? So you imagine, why did Pharaoh do that? Why did Pharaoh tell people he was a god? Wasn't it enough for Pharaoh just to tell people he's Pharaoh? Pharaoh could kill everybody. Pharaoh owns everybody. He owns everything. What does he have to be a god for? He's already the most powerful man. So what does he have to do that for? What's the purpose? Do you see the question? Like, why do it? I already can kill you if I want to. I can take you as a wife. I can take your money. I can do whatever I want to you, and nobody can do anything because I'm the law. I'm the king. I do what I want. So why does he have to go and lie and say I'm also a god? Because that means like the guy, if he's not feeling well, he can only go to the bathroom once a day. How many times are you going to take a bath before people catch on? Right? So so he can only do it. So he's got to go through. Imagine if he has to go to the bathroom and if he's got to wait like 20 hours for the next morning to come. But that's what he had to do. So why does he do it? Just say I'm the most powerful man and leave it there. Because then the reason is because of arrogance. When a person is arrogant, they think they're God. That's what they think they're greater than everybody. And it's not enough to just be better. I have to be super good. Right? It's not enough that me and this person here are not the same. We're not the same. But we're so different. That person and I are not even the same kind. Right? It's just like what the Nazis did with the Jews. The Jews aren't. It's not that the Jews are bad people. The Jews are bugs. They're animals. They're not like us at all. Right? That's what. Whenever someone goes to war, that's what they do. Right? You see it all the time. The Americans, they had names for the Vietnamese. They called them names. They had names for the Germans. They had names for the Japanese. Names for the Russians. All type of way to make them so they weren't human. Because I can't kill a human. They're too much like me, so they have to be different. So Pharaoh said, I'm the king. That's too similar to the other Egyptians. I'm a god. I'm even more arrogant. I'm a god. He had to do that. Because when a person gets to that point, they have to make themselves as big and as unique as they can, even if it hurts them. And it did. He had to go a whole day without going to the bathroom because of that. Right? And that's how God knew where he'd be. That shows you arrogance. It's the same arrogance that the Egyptians had when they wouldn't bring their animals in. You're going to tell me, right? So let's see, where are we here? You can discuss one more. We had some good ones for next week, so we won't run out. So here you have, at the end of the parsha, you have the hail, going to 337, 339. You have the hail. So it says at the end that Pharaoh sent and summoned Moshe on 339 and Aaron and says to them, this time I've sinned. Right? In other words, I give up. Right? You just destroyed all of our crops. Hashem is the righteous one, and I and my people are the wicked ones. Entreat Hashem. There has been an overabundance of godly thunder and hail. I shall send you out, and you shall not continue to remain. All right, so Pharaoh gives in, right? So it says, Moshe says to him, when I leave the city, I will spread out my hands to Hashem. The thunder will cease and the hail will no longer be, so that you shall know that the earth is Hashem's. Okay, that's logical. Then he goes on. And as for you and your servants, I know that you're not yet afraid of Hashem. The flax and the barley was struck, for the barley was ripe, and the flax was in its stalk. And the wheat and the spelt were not struck, for they ripen later. So here he says why he gives them a crop report in the middle of this discussion, I don't know. He's right in the middle of this talk where Pharaoh says, okay, you win, take the Jews out. Moses says, okay, you're wrong, we're right, we're taking the Jews out. Because God came and he destroyed the flax and the barley because they were ripe, right? But the wheat and the spelt he didn't, because they're not ripe yet. What do I care? You just destroyed my whole economy. Get out of here already. And Moses is giving him a crop report, like a farmer. Well, we destroyed this. We didn't destroy the wheat. You don't have any barley, but you have wheat. So what's he saying? So what he's saying is the following. If you look in the Hebrew, the translation is a little different. What it's saying is that the flax and the barley were ripe. It says they stood tall. Right? It's standing. The stalks are standing tall. So when the hail hit it, it broke. And they died. But the wheat wasn't ripe yet, so it was still soft. So the hail would hit it, and it would just push it down to the ground. When the hail left, it would stand back up. Right? That's what he's saying. So what he's doing is he's sending a message to Pharaoh. He's telling Pharaoh, you want to go to war with God? You want to be a tough guy? You want to stand up? We're going to knock you down, just like the flax and the barley. If you want to be smart, be like the wheat that bends. Be prepared to bend. Give in. Because then you can remain the head of this country. You can be the most powerful man in the world. But be prepared to bend. If you're not going to bend, you're going to say, I'm right, I'm always right, it's my way or no way, then we're going to destroy you. That was the message he was saying. He was saying it in a subtle way because Pharaoh in the end was king. And you have to treat kings with a certain amount of dignity. But that's what he's saying. He treated them with that dignity because he wanted Pharaoh to understand. If you want, this is not over yet. Because Moshe knew God's going to harden his heart. This isn't over yet. You want to make it through the rest of this struggle? Be prepared to bend. Be prepared to compromise, to give in. You don't want to give in. You don't want to let the Jews go. You want it to be your way. Then you'll be destroyed, just like the barley. You'll be knocked right down. But anything that can bend, the wind, right, the hail will hit it. It'll get better. So bend a little bit, but he doesn't. And the parsha ends with that. It's sort of it's foreshadowing. It's telling us what's going to happen next. Pharaoh's not going to bend. He's going to be like the barley, not like the wheat. That's what we'll see.